Hello, it's Friday, September 30th, 2022. This is the Side Show. I'm Theodore Parker. And around here, the temperature is about 48, going up to 72. Feels like 45. So we're experiencing some of that fall weather. As you know, Hurricane Ian has cleared out of Florida, headed towards South Carolina. Maybe a couple of days to reach that area. In the meantime, Florida is trying to recover and do damage assessment in regards to what has happened during Ian storm after it reached landfall there. I got another story for you a little bit later. Still talking about the mask. And if your positivity rate is up over 5%, suggestion is to wear it if you're going to go out and be around people. Again, that's a measure of prevention. So, yesterday I kind of missed it. Yesterday was the birthday for the man that wrote the book Don Quixote. As far as Hispanic Heritage Month is concerned, today is the birthday of the man who's often referred to as the voice in the Hispanic community. I'm just going to kind of condense those two things together because it's Friday, it's going to be the weekend, it's the last day of the month. Once the sun comes up tomorrow, it'll be the first day of October. So I'd mentioned Netflix. I'd also mentioned Monster, Jeffrey Dahmer. So I'm kind of like put this out there a little bit this morning. Like I say, it's the weekend, a couple of minutes here and there. So it's a 10 episode series. And it takes place in the 90s. Ohio and Milwaukee. So, if you're not familiar, with it, I knew about it, maybe from other TV documentaries on serial killers and things like this. And I'd already mentioned that they had the documentary from the perspective of the police that were trying to catch Jeffrey Dahmer in Milwaukee. But it's kind of presented a little bit different than this film that's on Netflix now. So, his appearance as a young man still kind of maintains it up into the ages of maturity. And it kind of starts out in Ohio. The family there, him being in grade school. Well, I don't think it was middle school, but maybe. And then on into high school. So that's a little background. His father was a doctor. And his mother did some other kind of work, and he had a brother. So early on, in the movie, the father and the mother break up, and he's left, and the father takes off with another woman. And so during his high school summer, he's left alone in the home. So at that point, he commits 2 murders. But because of his father being a doctor, somehow or another, he came up with this off-balance idea that they should pick up roadkill and dissect it. That's kind of like how he got introduced into it. But I say introduced into it because Jeffrey Dahmer was found to not only murder people, men in particular, and later on it became clear that he was homosexual and going to gay bars and inviting what turned out to be black and brown men back to his home and killing them. So that went on, that went on for years. The movie covers it like a 10-year period. Like the initial murders that were done in high school, then he said he laid off, for X amount of time or whatever. Then when he started again, it was like every couple of months. And some of the most horrible parts of it are that there was youngest was 14 years old. So because there are real life victims involved in this, although a large percentage of them, due to the passage of time, have died, it's still maybe some family members that can feel, some of that aftermath of it. Excuse me. But if you watch it, the 10 series, I think I should mention this. I think each one of the episodes was directed by a different person, including at least one woman, maybe more than one woman. So that kind of allows, different aspects of it to be presented accordingly. So the most horrific parts of it is that not only was he, cutting the bodies up and things of this nature and eating parts of them, that because the manner in which he was doing it, he had the body parts like around because of things that he was doing. So everybody noticed the smell. And from the early Ohio murders, when his father came to check on him with his new wife, he noticed the smell. So he got in trouble, so forth and so on. His father took him out of the house, kind of blamed his mother for leaving him there because his mother left and took his brother with her. And he took him, meaning Jeffrey, to his grandmother's. I think that was in Milwaukee. So they left Bath, Ohio, took him to his grandmother's, and he moved in with her. So there was a gay bar in the neighborhood, and he started frequenting the gay bar, which is when he started picking up, which is where the racial part of it comes in, picking up black men and brown men and bringing back home and murdering them. So at some point after he's captured, Jesse Jackson is featured in the movie or in the series as, calling the public's attention to this aspect of this criminal activity. And again, after a little while at his grandmother's house, she noticed the smell. And he would, explain it away. And plus he was, became an alcoholic, constantly drinking beer and things of that nature. He would explain away like he had bought some bad meat or cooked some meat wrong or something else like that. But the cannibal aspect of it was evidence once he was captured and they start bringing the evidence out of his apartment in Milwaukee that he was eating body parts and other things that they were finding. So I'm not like going to put a whole spoiler alert on it. But by the time you go from episode 1, which I had seen a couple of episodes, and I just decided, well, let me finish this and kind of like get it out the way. And you get to episode 10, and he's had his trial and everything else like that. He asked to be electrocuted. A judge gave him 900 years. And then the final scene is in the prison. So that took him to 34 years old. And he had committed 17 murders. So Glenda Cleveland is mentioned in the series, a black woman as having called the police several times, particularly in the incident of the 14-year-old boy who Jeffrey Dahmer claimed was his boyfriend and was 19, even invited the police in to prove it with photos, that they were, boyfriend and boyfriend. And she insisted that, the boy didn't look to be 19. He was only a child, and the police, declined after multiple calls and complaints from her to come and investigate and see what was going on. So I think, without putting a whole lot of details and stuff out there, the film is so intense with the constant mention of everybody that came around him, everybody he brought to his apartment. The first thing they said, "What is that smell?" The superintendent of the building, he was out, and the neighbor, Glenda Cleveland, wanted the superintendent to go in there and see what the smell was. By this time, everybody in the building, in the apartment building, is complaining of the smell. So I'm thinking, like, she's saying it's coming right through the van and it's coming from his apartment and this and that. So in my mind, I'm like, well, how can you eat? How can you even prepare a meal? And then she's also hearing sounds of struggle and violence coming from the apartment. And the whole time, various incidents that Jeffrey is being stopped for other things, or people are coming to check. He's just constantly putting down to bad meat, bad cooking procedures, this or that or the other. And, when it came down to conviction, he said, well, I'm getting it cleaned and so forth and so on. So he just shifted. So the other two ingredients to the movie is, besides his father showing him how to dissect roadkill, is that after he had lost his job for whatever reason and being drunk and not going or something like that, and his grandmother complained of the smell at her home, came and got him and told him he was going to go in the military at 21. So when he went in the military, somehow or another, he wrangled an opportunity to learn how to be a medic. So in his military training, he learned about pharmaceuticals and other, medical procedures and things of this nature, which just like gave him the information to go forward, because all of his victims had been drugged by offering them a drink, to center on one particular medicine that would have this effect and incapacitate them immediately, if not sooner. So there you have the two things. The father with the dissecting, the medical training from the military, which he was discharged from for bad conduct within a year or after a year, to give him the knowledge to go ahead and do the horrific things that he did. But I will say this, before, if you are going to watch it or you haven't watched it, the film is so intense, I think, that when you finish, you will have the feeling of everybody saying, when they came around him, what is that smell? Because the policemen, when they were interviewing him, said, well, decomposing bodies is a checkpoint for humans. They just automatically rebel at that. But he was living with it. So much for monster Jeffrey Dahmer, dead at age 34, killed in prison. The next one, so after I finished that, I said, well, okay, let me relieve my mind a little bit. So I'll look at Blonde. So Blonde is a story of Marilyn Monroe, and chases her, movie efforts and certain movies she was, working on. And again, I don't want to spoil it with a bunch of details. And then her marriages and so forth and so on. But the key points as to how everything developed was kind of like in tracing her parents. So again, this is kind of like hitting on Hispanic Heritage Month, and it is the last day of the month and so forth and so on. But anyway, her mother was born, let me see if I can get it right, it was, I can't say it, in Negros, Colos, Mexico, okay? A mother was from Missouri, and her mother's father was from Indiana. So Marilyn Monroe's mother, Norma Jean's mother, was born in Mexico. Her father, by biological tracing, was from Rhode Island. But there is that little voice mannerism that she has, which speaks to the Cuban Hispanic influence. And so there it is. So anyway, after she was born, just the kind of background of it, her mother had a mental collapse and she was committed, but she had, I guess the way it's portrayed in the movie, she had a mental collapse at home trying to drown Norma Jean. So Norma Jean manages to get away, goes to the neighbors, which was a friend of her mother's. And after everything kind of settled a little bit, the neighbors were in charge of taking care of her. So she was born in 1926. So the story goes that it wasn't long after that she came to the neighbors that the husband was found out to be molesting her. And that was found out in 1937. So she was just 11 years old. So took her out of there, sent her to several other foster homes accredited, and she ends up back there again after a few years. So at 16, she kind of takes a fancy to one of the boys in the neighborhood, the neighbor, and at 16, they get married. So now she's kind of like off to the races with all these other things that are going on. So there's always some inference in there about whether or not she's pregnant. You're familiar with her 3 marriages, DiMaggio and Miller, the writer, and one other person, and all the other little incidents that's in it. But just like with Dahmer, there's no like blatant sexual thing, although it's obvious that he is homosexual. It's just the air on the film. So on this, it's a little different with Marilyn, female presentation. They do have scenes that are portrayed on how men treated her and in her movie career and the films that she was assigned to, and as she gradually broke down. But intermediately, it showed her idea of wanting to be pregnant or thinking about being pregnant. So it seems that when she was outside the country, she did have 2 miscarriages, but she never gave birth to any children. So this is another one. At age 36, she was dead. So, looking at Dahmer, age 34, looking at her, 1926, to when she died, both in their 30s, but different situations, but having that additional background about it kind of explains her betrayal of as far as her personality and the way she was betrayed to the public and other things like that, because she was just so young with so much tragedy and wrongful things happening in her life. So, there you have it. Monster and Blonde. So I'm kind of like more, if I may say so, an action movie kind of guy, man, or whatever. So this was just definitely, a lot for me to handle. So if you want to, you can look at it. form your own opinion. Those two, since they are being mentioned as being available. You might not be able to get through it at all in one setting, or, might not want to finish it. But I would suggest that you go ahead and finish it. I wouldn't want all that just convoluting in my mind and not see how it ends on both movies. So I definitely suggest that you see it through so that you can get some closure and clearance on all the atmosphere that's presented and feelings that are shown in both those films. So here we have it, Friday, September 30th, 2022. I got one more thing for you. We've been talking about Florida and Ian, and somebody sent me a clip, a friend of mine from Florida, short video. And if you know anything about Florida, if you would indulge me a little bit, or if you don't, this is for the people that don't. Okay, 95 runs from the north part of Florida down to Miami. Fort Myers more in the northern part of it, but also West Palm Beach is where all the cruise ships take off in Florida. That being said, this is where most of the storm and stuff was happening. And as it's indicated, this is on the western side of Florida, since it is a peninsula. Now, most of the time, Florida is hot. Got these little geckos and things running around and all that. At the time I visited, I stayed in Fort Lauderdale, which is like smack dab in the middle, but access in either direction, north or south. And they got, the side road, they call the SR, that parallels 95, so that you don't have to get on 95, but you can still access the city through various, access Florida through various exits. Okay, most of the time, Florida's hot. I mean, if it's 70 degrees, then it's like freezing. So mid 80s to 90s is just regular bake in Florida. So, that being said, this friend of mine, she sends me this clip, and it's funny, but it's not funny, of a shark swimming up one of the Fort Myers streets, right? It's obvious that it's a shark, but it's swimming up the Fort Myers Street, right in the middle of all these floodwaters that's going on and everything like that. So Sarasota Bay sits there, and just outside of Sarasota Bay, as has been mentioned in the weather reports and stuff like that, is the Gulf of Mexico. So there you have it. So that was kind of a funny but not funny moment when I watched it. So there we are. Okay, it's the weekend. Into October 2022. This is the Sideshow. I'm Theodore Parker. That's it. Hashtag.